Well, good afternoon. Welcome to another training session. Today we're going to talk about Flow-Xpress and the basics behind Flow-Xpress, which is the configuration tool for the FlowX line of flow computers. My name is Brent Palmer. I'm with CRT Services, and hope everybody is doing well out there today. It's a beautiful day here in Houston, so hopefully it's beautiful where you're at also. I know we got a difficult time with us right now, and just hope that everybody is safe. If there's anything that we at CRT Services can do to help you out, please don't hesitate to give us a call or send us an email, and we will help out in the best way that we can. We're going to continue on with our series on measurement and measurement devices, and today we're just going to go over a little bit of Flow-Xpress, which is the configuration tool for the FlowX line of flow computers. So Flow-Xpress is meant to build your reports, your logic, the firmware, displays, communications, everything that gets packed into a FlowX flow computer. It is like I said, the firmware and the application behind what we're doing. So it's how we load to the flow computer, whether it's a liquids flow computer or a gas flow computer, whether it is for US or metric units, and the functionality that may be customized behind it. We're going to start off today with Flow-Xpress, and we're going to go over just a basic US liquids. So PowerPoint presentations are done, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up Flow-Xpress. And if you'll notice, it says right there that it is the most ideal platform for flow measurement solutions. So it must be true because now it's on the internet. And what you're looking at is this is the FlowX module. So the module can fit into a host of different bases, but the heart and soul behind the FlowX is both software and this module. So the module has all the physical I/O coming into it, our processor, our memory, our storage, and then Flow-Xpress is what we use to, again, build these applications, update the firmware inside of it, and create displays and reports. And we're going to go over some of those basic functions today. So the first thing I need to do is I actually need to open up an application, and we have standard templates. The templates are for liquids, for gas, for two-run, for single run, for LAC control, for truck rack control, for sampling. We have a whole library of applications, and they're available online at ABB Spirit IT or also at CRT. We host some of the applications up there too. So the module doesn't really come from the factory as far as being dedicated for one thing or another. It can be a gas flow computer, it can be a liquids flow computer. Again, it's all by the application that's loaded up with Flow-Xpress. In this case, we're going to load up a liquids application. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up and search for where I have a liquids application. In this case, it is a new liquids USC master application, version 3.0. And I'll open that up, and it's going to go ahead and compile and process through and open it up into all of our different navigation displays that we can go ahead and start configuring this module up. When we're all said and done with our initial configuration and setting everything up on it, we write it down to the flow computer. It updates the firmware. The module gets loaded with this. It does a quick reboot, and then it's up and ready to go. So depending on the size of the application, it can take a few seconds for it to actually compile and go through and get it set up into a format where we can see what's going on. So it's just about done. And what you're looking at on the front right now as it's compiling, this is the base that we call the XS. So we have that module that we first looked at. It's now stuck into a base that holds a single module. The I/O or the wiring can all be connected into the two terminal blocks, and you have your two Ethernet ports, and then you also have your power supply connector that's sitting there. Now, the FlowX, we're able to join multiple modules together to create multiple runs and multiple systems. If we're creating multiple modules, what we do is we come up to the device setup up top, and we say instead of it being single, we're going to be in a rack, which the rack just means that we're going to have multiple modules. Now, it doesn't mean that when you're purchasing a FlowX that you have to have these inside of the rack if you're going to have more than one module and you want to join them together. You can join multiple modules together that are in this type of base or our XK base. This is just a graphical representation of a rack and just holds multiple modules. So if I'm using the multiple module mode, I can come over here to the count and select the number of modules I have in a system, and it will then create the application to be able to be uploaded to multiple modules within the system, and they'll join together to create one flow computer. We're going to keep it simple today, though. We're just going to stay with a single. On the left-hand side, I have my navigation that's going to allow me to go through the configuration and start setting up the various processes, communication sheets, displays, and reports that I want to upload to the Flow computer as part of its core application. So we're going to start off pretty simplistically of going to ports and devices. Now, if you look on the left, underneath this device, I have my module. The FlowX has two communications ports for serials, so COM port 1 and COM port 2. We have 4 additional ports that are part of the analog HART communication. So on analog input 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're able to configure those as HART devices, and each HART device or each analog can have up to 16 HART devices on there. So we can multi-drop up to 16 HART devices, 16 transmitters or other HART devices on just one analog loop. So that makes it where a single module can handle up to 64 different HART devices. We have 2 Ethernet ports, but you'll notice we only list 1 Ethernet port. That's because it doesn't matter whether you're coming into Ethernet port 1 or port 2, you're going to hit Modbus communications, or we're going to go out and connect to printers and something else. And our settings inside our network setup in the Flow computer will determine which Ethernet port it goes out by how you have that port defined. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete out some of these devices that are here right now and show you how we add devices in. Now, by default, the FlowX does not have Modbus mapping installed on it, meaning that it is basically a blank device, and you can create your own Modbus templates, or you can use some of the pre-canned templates we have, but we haven't assigned those to Ethernet ports or to any of the serial ports yet. So if I need to talk Modbus, I can make it look like other Flow computers that may be out there, or I can just select our generic tag list where we have our tags mapped out to specific Modbus registers. And we're able to print that out and display those registers. So when you poll or when you're setting up the FlowX, you can give that to a PLC or DCS or SCADA engineer, and they'll be able to pick the appropriate Modbus registers. Or if you want it to look like another Flow computer and use the same Modbus mapping as an existing Flow computer you have on your system, we have some pre-canned templates that are already set up for that. In this case, though, what I want to do is I just want to use the standard tag list that's associated with the FlowX that has Modbus registers mapped to it. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to put that on my Ethernet port. So I simply either go up top to New, or on Ethernet, I right-click, say New, and I'm going to select this Modbus tag list. And I can name that tag list anything I want. I'll just keep it as, I'll just put it as Modbus tags. And I don't need 2 T's into it. So that's going to go ahead and assign this configuration and this communication sheet, this template, to Ethernet. Now I can also assign another Modbus template to it, and just by using a different Modbus ID and port number, you can connect to that too. So if, let's say, if I wanted to also look like an Omni version 20 Modbus mapping, I can create Omni version 20. And when I click on it and come over here, I can change my port number. Right now it's defaulted at port 502. I could make it port 503, port 504, or I can keep it at 502 and just change the Modbus ID when I'm in the web interface. And I can change that through the display that's automatically created when I have a new communication sheet made to the FlowX. You also see that the Modbus type, I can either use Modbus TCP, or I can select RTU over TCP or encapsulated Modbus. So you have a couple different selections that you're able to utilize with our communications. Now, what if I want to talk to a Coriolis meter? Well, there's some Coriolis meters out there now that have built-in web services, so I can either talk to it across Ethernet. So I could select new and then go to an ABB Coriolis meter. And what this will do is it'll put the communications, the Modbus communications on Ethernet, and then I can assign an IP address later on for it to poll. Or if it's not Ethernet, if it's serial, I can come up to one of my COM ports and right-click on the COM port and select new, and then say I want to talk to a micromotion flow meter. So I can select micromotion, and I can put a micromotion on COM port 1, and then on COM port 2, I could say, I'm going to look at an ABB Coriolis meter. So on serial port number 2, I have an ABB Coriolis meter now. And if I wanted to multi-drop and put multiple devices on a single COM port, I can multi-drop them and say new and say I need another micromotion. So now I have a micromotion number 2, or whatever that meter may be. And now I'll just make sure when I get online with the units that I assign different IDs, Modbus IDs, that I'm going to pull them for. The other thing we can do, that's creating where these COM ports are masters, but they can also be slaves. So I can take those Modbus lists that I have on Ethernet, and I can also select new and assign them to the serial port. So if I have to make a connection to a PLC, I can say, okay, well, I'm going to use this template. And with this template, when you pull me on the serial port, I will go ahead and respond back as a slave now instead of being a master. So I can load these up with different options of whether they're slaves or whether they're masters. And again, these are the different templates that we have built in for both serial communications and Ethernet communications, Ethernet TCP. Now, the last thing I want to configure is I can configure a printer because I may want something, one of my reports to print out. So I'm going to select an Ethernet printer and say new and just create a new text printer. On that text printer, I'll click on it and I'll go ahead and I'll give it a name. Let's say that this is a batch printer. And later on, I'll be able to, when I go into the web interface, assign an IP address to it. And that will print out to whatever IP. So anything that is, all the reports that are set up for a batch printer will go right to this batch printer. So we've set up our Ethernet ports. We've got some settings here where we can set up the default date and time formats. Our home display, which is when we go into the web interface, where our home display should be, whether it's by default the home, or whether it's into, I want to go directly in and have somebody go in and see the pulse inputs for the flow meter, or I just want it to default into the flow rates for 1 as soon as you log into the FlowX. So you can select different home screens. You can tell it to automatically navigate home after a period of time, 30 seconds or 300 seconds, or you can have the device and device name fully up on the web bar. You can automatically log off after so many seconds. In this case, we're going to log off after 1,800 seconds of inactivity, and you can completely shut off or disable the web access, where the web browser is basically, the web server is basically shut down, and there's no access through the web interface. Displays are how we build the displays in the FlowX. So the displays are basically folders with subfolders and groupings of tags in them. So when I look at these folders, if I want to preview the user interface, this in use, I have a folder. And then in that, I have a subfolder, run 1. And these are the tags, meter run temperature, meter run pressure. When I come over here to configuration, again, in use, run 1. And I have my tag for meter run temperature, meter run pressure. If I want to add more information to these screens, I simply can look up the tags. You have 29,296 tags to choose from. Find the tag that you want. If I want the analog input calibration reference value, and I can bring it up, drag it, drop it, put it in here. And then when I write it to the Flow computer, it will create that new tag. And then when I go look at it, you'll see I have my current reference value for my calibration. So you can modify these displays for what you actually need to see on them. If I need to take that back off, it's simply a matter of deleting it. Of course, I deleted the wrong one, so that's not good. I'm not going to save this. Or if I need to add a new one in, I'll go ahead and copy this when I know I deleted off the temperature, and I know temperature is TT. So I'm going to just change the tag to TT, current, and that's my meter run temperature. These displays can also be copied. So I can copy them and put them over and over again and reuse them. So you may see a tag that's underneath this one display, and it may be repeated underneath another display and another display, because you can display these tags in multiple locations. So there may be more than one place that you can go to set up the flow computer, or to see a specific value, or to change a specific value within it. You are able to set up languages. So we have had customers where we had to create a language map. So in this case, if I wanted to create a new language, I would say, okay, the word password, and I want to change that into another language, of which I don't know absolutely none. So we'll just make this password E. Maybe that's a language, I don't know. But now when I would go select another language, when I load this up to the Flow computer, I can do a translation. And we've done them in Spanish, Chinese, German, a bunch of different languages. Parameters are the things like the tags, meter factors, our configuration that we're setting up inside the web browser. So typically, a parameter is anything we use the web interface for to set up. But you can preset up the parameters before you even get in live with the Flow computer, and you can download the parameters to the Flow computer. So here I can go into configuration and go into common settings and tell this Flow computer that it's part of a proving run, a station run, and I can set my totalizer rollover values and so forth, and they'll be saved here. And when I go to write the application, I can write it, and I can also choose to download these parameters that I've already pre-set up. Reports, these are the different reports I have in the Flow computer. So the reports themselves, I can, let's say, go into that meter ticket that I want. And when I click on properties, this is where you can see that I have a batch printer. If I have multiple printers, I can assign the number of copies I want to go to each printer, how long I want to keep these reports for. I'm going to keep the last 100 batch reports inside of there, and the command tags and so forth. So I'm able to assign whether reports are going to be printed out or not, what printer they go to, and then on the reports themselves, I have my text company, but then I have the tag up top here. You can see that it says system company, and that's the data that it's going to pull out of the tag list and put on this report when it's generated. So I can see some of the reference tags that I've used in here. Indicated volume comes off of LU run 1. There's a tag called run 1 IV underscore BTOT underscore forward underscore previous, which all that means is off of run module 1. On run 1, I want to grab the indicated volume for the batch total in the forward direction, and I want to grab the previous value. So when I batch end, I take my current information and put it in previous. And if I'm trying to print a report out, I need to grab what the previous information is to put on a batch report, because it already occurred a split second before we moved everything over in our tags and our registers. So in changing these reports, you can copy these reports simply by right-clicking on them, right-clicking on them, copying them, and then I can just paste and go on and say, instead of a copy of meter ticket 1, I can call it rent meter ticket 1, and I can go in and start modifying this. I haven't modified the original. Now I've created a new ticket that's got Brent on it, and I can put new text on it. Brent is great. And then I can grab a tag that would definitely just say yes, instead of having the option for yes and no. And then I can preview what that report will look like. And you can see Brent is great there. When I come back, I can change the meter ticket. I can put in new lines in here. So if I right click, I can insert a new row. You can change the height, you can delete rows out, and again, you can copy information. So I can copy groupings of tags, let's say from a recalc ticket, and I want to grab these tags here. I can right-click, copy those, bring those up to my ticket, and paste them wherever I want. If I don't like the decimal resolution, let's say the indicated volume, I want to take it out to 4 or 5 decimal places, I simply click on the cell that contains the information I want, and then up here in the upper right, I can change the number of decimal places that I want put on that display or that report. And there, I'll go to 4 decimal places. That doesn't mean that the rounding and truncating will stay at 4. The rounding and truncating are parameter rules, and you set those up inside the Flow computer, whether you want to comply with API's rounding and truncating rules. So if I'm rounding the indicated volume to the 2nd decimal place, even though I display 4 decimal places, it's going to be rounded to the 2nd decimal place, but I'll show 2 more zeros at the end of it. And then the reports themselves, you'll see some of them are a lighter gray and a darker black. What that means is that these are either enabled or disabled. And you can see that enabled, this one's enabled. If I click it and disable it, now it's disabled next to it, and it won't be printed out or calculated inside. When I enable it, I bring it back on. The last thing is it reoccurring? Meaning that we have reports, if I have multiple modules, the same with displays, that can be reoccurring. So for every module I have in the system, I can make this report occur for that particular module. So module 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I just need to make the report one time, and if I make it reoccurring, then with it reoccurring, it will create its own instance of modules 1 through 8 to create these reports for the runs. Security are my users. So you can build a security file in here with unique usernames and passwords. And to add a new user in, I simply click on New User. I'll put in myself as the user. So this will be the login name that I use, the full name that shows up in the audit trail. I was way off on typing that. The security level. And we'll go into levels on another course. Set a password for it. If I don't select anything, there won't be any password. I just need to log on with the username Brent. And the PIN is for the front. So if I have a 6-digit PIN I want to put so you can have access to the LCD on the front to be able to do configuration, you put in your PIN number here. Calculations are a way of writing Boolean and variable statements. So it's a way of writing logic, not in the main part of the Flow computer, but you can write quick logic statements in here to turn digitals on or off or to add values together. So you could add 2 runs together to create a total of the 2 runs and create a new tag for that. Again, we'll do a training session based upon just on some simplistic calculations. Our historical data, this is our SQL databases. So what happens is we're setting up a archive that is going to be captured every time the run 1 batch archive trigger is made, which is a batch end. We're going to store this information for 70 days. It's stored as an SQLite. If we're using a Modbus, Enron Modbus way of pulling archives out, it will keep the last 64, and then we define the tags that we want to store in this archive database. So when this triggers, it's going to go ahead and capture all the values for these tags and keep them in the database. And you can see we have them for run 1, run 2, for our daily, hourly, proving information, period A, period B, and batch recalculation. If I right-click on them, I can make them reoccurring, again, which means that for every module in the system, it will create an archive for this. So if I have 8 modules and I want a batch for me to run, I simply have to hit reoccurring, and now it will create 8 different archives or 8 different SQL database entries that all have this information from module 1, module 2, module 3, and so forth. If I don't need to be reoccurring, I can turn it off. And you can add as many archives in here as that you would like to for storage. You just have to be aware of how you're storing them, whether it's the number of days or the max size. We recommend always doing the number of days. It's a simple calculation. It doesn't take up much processor, as where if I'm calculating the max size, every time a new archive is created, I have to recalculate out the remaining size that I have. So we just recommend keeping it for a number of days. You have a gigabyte of storage. There's an awful lot of information you can store inside the Flow computer. Logging is for the audit trail. So inside of logging, it allows you to configure up what you're going to capture when an event occurs inside the system. And then on alarming, you can set up different alarms inside. Our units and formats is where we can configure, let's say that we want to convert absolute pressure into another unit. We can convert our base units into units that we may not have in the flow computer. So if I have a unit in there that's, say, barrels per hour, but our customer has a request and they want it in gallons per 3 hours, you can create your own enumeration and a new unit, and then put in a conversion factor and then use that in a display or later on in the calculation. Enumerations are simply our drop-down selections that we would see. So we have a selection for baud rate, and then you can create the drop-down from that. So on the web interface that you're able to see a drop-down instead of having to type in 2400 or 4800 or something else. And the last part is our version control. So you have the ability to do version tracking inside the FlowX. The master revisions are version tracked, and they're incremented up. We can see the history of how it went from 2.0 to 3.0. But then locally, as I start creating function inside there, I can say initial release, communications setup, and then I can add revision. It'll add those notes in there, but it'll also change the version number that's recorded with this software. So when I load it up to the Flow computer and look to see what version of software that I have up there, it will show up as 3.0.0.1. Then the last thing I do is I save it, and I can rename it if I want to save it. So I can do a file, save it as, let's say, Brent's new app. And I'm just going to put here 3.0.0.1 because that lets me know on the file name what it is. I hit save. And when I'm ready, I can go ahead and upload this to the Flow computer by hitting the arrow that points to the Flow computer. So again, it's going to go ahead and compile this application. It's going to look for any errors in the way that I've configured it. If there are any errors, it's not going to allow it to upload. It'll basically come back with an error list, and then I'll have to go through and start clearing those errors out to allow it to upload. That doesn't mean that you can't have bad math in there or create a bad logic statement that says 1 + 1 = 5. It just means that there's not any errors as far as the way that the program is set up and any tags that you've created. So you can see right now, I'm trying to write to a Flow computer, but it says it's not the right type of Flow computer. This is a virtual Flow computer, but my application is for an XS. So I need to make sure that I set it up properly for an XS. So I'll go look, and I'll look for other Flow computers that I may have, or I can specify the Flow computer. So if I want to specify a Flow computer, I can say, I'll go to 10.1.10.200. It'll search for that Flow computer. It'll tell me the application that's in the Flow computer, the Flow-Xpress version that's in there. When I hit next, it's going to tell me that the firmware will be updated. It's going to change some of the archives. It asks me, do I still want to update? Yes. Do I want to write the parameters? So this will overwrite meter factors, tag names, IO setup, and everything else that I may have in there. So if it's a new module, I may want to say yes. Do I have a new user security file to write to it? If yes, check that. If not, I won't leave those unchecked, and I won't overwrite those. Once I hit write, I'll be prompted for a username and password. Once I have the proper username and password, I can go ahead and write to the device. It'll write down the application. The Flow computer will restart, and then we can get into the Flow computer and start doing the rest of the parameter setup. So that's a basic view of Flow-Xpress in the basic mode. We're going to do some more of these where we go into the professional mode, and we're also going to break down functions of Flow-Xpress on how to build reports, on how to build displays, and go into more detail on how this is all done. This was meant to give you a basic navigation overview of Flow-Xpress in the basic mode, and we're just about at our limit. I wanted to see if there was any questions that anybody may have that I can answer, or something I can show you real quick if you have a question. And I'm going to either let you go ahead and turn your mic on and ask the question, or if you want, you can go ahead and type to the chat, and type your question in there. And if there's not any questions, we will move on. Okay, perfect. Well, if you want to go over anything, obviously give us a call. We've got experts standing by to help you out with your applications and also answer the questions you have for you. And like I said, if there's anything that we can do to give you guys a hand, please give us a call, send us an email, and if you want to host some other training events, we would love to be able to host them with you and put your information up online. If you're a subject matter expert, we'd love to share your information with our vast subscribers that are out there. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and stay safe, and we will talk to you next time. Thank you.